Wells Fargo presents one of the surest ways to grow your money. A Wells Fargo CD account, where you can earn a 5.00% annual percentage yield on an 11-month term with a minimum opening deposit of $5,000. Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/CD rates to open a CD account and start growing your savings with us.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Hey, it's Storyworthy. Today on the show, comedy manager Barry Katz talks about the loss of his first wife.
I've had a lot of personal things happen to me that have been difficult, like all of you have. And one of the things that is interesting about our lives is that when we're younger, our parents try to shelter us from all the things that are negative or that are bad that happen. They don't really prepare us for what's going to happen. They try to make everything right for us. And when bad things happen to you, there's a reason for it.
Today on the show, Hollywood manager Barry Katz talks about the loss of his first wife and what it means to over-deliver. Stay close.
This is Barry Katz, and you're listening to Worthy Story.
Welcome to Storyworthy. My name is Christine Blackburn, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Whether you're a longtime fan of the show of over 12 and a half years, or you are a new listener, welcome to Storyworthy. I hope you guys enjoyed the show last week with comedian Heather McDonald. Heather McDonald talked about her very dysfunctional family and her sister, who is just not friendly with Heather. Heather and her sister are not in contact, and it's a really intense story. So go back, listen to Heather McDonald last week, but not today. Stay with me today, because today I've got Hollywood manager Barry Katz telling a story. And Barry talks about losing his first wife, which is absolutely tragic. And then he talks about what it means to over-deliver. And if you're a comedian, this is the show to listen to, because Barry Katz has managed some of the biggest comedians in the world, including Dave Chappelle, Louis C.K., and a lot of other really big names. Before we get to Barry's story, I wanted to remind you guys that I am re-airing some of the best stories from the past 12 years so that I can spend more time on my other show, My Life in 3 Songs. My Life in 3 Songs is exclusively over on Spotify because we listen to the music that the comics talk about. I talk with comedians about the 3 songs in their life that have impacted them. Not necessarily their favorite songs, but songs that paint a picture of the comedian and who they are. Recently, I've had on Kira Sultanovich and Ed Krasnick. So get over there, you guys, to Spotify. You can check out mylifein3songs.com for more information, and also follow the show on social media at My Life in 3 Songs. All right, you guys, without further delay, please put your hands together for the very talented Barry Katz.
Everybody here who's listening on the podcast, who's here live, whatever you've tried to do in your life, you start something and nothing is happening before you started. And when I started the podcast, everyone I knew told me not to do it because, you know, as a manager, you're not supposed to be doing things that are, how should you say it, not necessarily in line with management. But in my mind, I was creating relationships, I was fostering relationships, and it's all worked out. And I'm humbled to know how many people have listened and how many people continue to listen, because I did it to help people. And if you do get a chance to listen, you'll notice why. But I have I'm supposed to tell one story, but I'm going to tell 2 stories tonight. Because if you know my podcast, you know I never know what I'm going to say until I look into the eyes of the people here. And normally I started in comedy. I started as a stand-up comedian. But I think I'm going to tell a couple of stories that are not necessarily comedic. The first story I want to tell is something that to let you know that anything that happens to you in your life that's bad, and I've had a lot of things happen to me that's bad, it's well documented. I've been fired by many, many artists, and I've been hired by many artists. And I've had a lot of personal things happen to me that have been difficult, like all of you have. And one of the things that is interesting about our lives is that when we're younger, our parents try to shelter us from all the things that are negative or that are bad that happen. They don't really prepare us for what's going to happen. They try to make everything right for us. And my message in this first story is the fact that when bad things happen to you, there's a reason for it. You don't know why, but there's a reason. So the first story I'm going to tell is a story that was one of the most difficult times in my life. One of my dogs was killed by a coyote in my yard. And I have two boys, 10 and 11. And I was teaching a comedy class for them the next day that I do every year for them. And so I couldn't tell them. And so I held it inside. I had this anxiety inside that many of you felt in your personal life and your professional life, but I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to tell them, so I held it in after the comedy class, and then I had to wait till the next day, and I met them at a park, and I knew I was going to tell them, and it was really, really difficult to figure out what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. And so when I met with them in the park, I told them that their dog was killed by a coyote, and what's the weird and odd thing is that my mom had passed away about 6 months earlier, and I hadn't cried yet. Sometimes you just don't experience that feeling of how you're going to release something that you need to get released, but you don't know when or how, and it just never came out until I started telling my sons, and I started crying, like hyperventilating, crying in front of them. And my sons turned into a parent, and they hugged me and they said, "Daddy, don't cry. It's not your fault. You didn't do it. Don't be sad. Please don't cry, Daddy. It's okay. It's okay, Daddy." And they turned into the parent, as I said. And then I thought to myself, how am I going to show them how bad things happen and then they turn into good things? And I hugged them and I said, I want to tell you a story that you know part of. I said, when your dad was 26 years old, he was married to a girl who was 23, and unfortunately she passed away. And at that point in time that she died, your dad spent a lot of time in bed. He didn't know what to do. He just was depressed all the time. And he couldn't imagine how it was possible that the world would take away a person who was 23 years old. And at the time, just like you both, you don't understand why the world took away your dog. And at the time, I didn't understand why one day I was talking to somebody, I was holding somebody, I was telling somebody I loved them, and the next day they were gone. And as I hugged them tighter, I said, but the reality is at the point when that happened, I didn't understand what the reason was. None of you who are listening or are here live understand what the reason is, why you're fired from your job, or why some best friend that you have all of a sudden cuts you off and you don't know why, or there's something else that happens in your life that you just can't figure out what it is or how you're gonna respond to it because it doesn't make any sense. And I said to my sons, I said, listen, if my first wife hadn't passed away, I wouldn't be sitting here right now looking into the eyes of my children. And the world has a strange way of working. And on that particular day, the world took my first wife, but there was a master plan, something that I didn't realize. And the plan is that eventually I was going to meet somebody else, and I was going to have you guys, and you were going to bring joy into my life. And so for all you out there listening, the point of this first message is whatever adversity you're going through or whatever things that have happened in your life that have taken your knees out from under you, just know that there's a reason for it, and there's something positive that's going to come forward. And I can guarantee you that because it happened to me. So that's my first story. And my second story has to do with adversity too, but it has to do with a positive side of adversity that'll probably lighten things up a little bit, as you guys are probably in a coma right now. I got the pleasure of hanging out with an amazing man a couple of days ago, Irvin Magic Johnson. And Magic, as you know, was diagnosed with HIV about 25 years ago. And when I talked to him, it was an incredible time I had with him. And he spoke to a group of people that sponsor my podcast. And he had a message that I loved. And I'm going to share that message with all of you. For your personal lives and your business lives, his message was really simple. 2 words: over-deliver. And if you over-deliver in your lives and in your business life and your personal life, his message was you'll always succeed. And he told these amazing stories, and I'll share a few of them with you. Just the trajectory of his life and how he over-delivered. When he was in high school, he was a prodigy, but before high school, he was really, really good, and he was poised to go to the #1 high school in East Lansing, Michigan. Unfortunately, court-ordered busing happened, and he was forced to go to a white school that was the worst basketball team in Michigan. And he said to himself, I have to over-deliver. I have to figure out how to take this team and win a state championship. And within the next 3 to 4 years, he worked with this team. He had a work ethic. He did what he had to do. And they won the state championship for the first time in the history of the school. And then he decided he wanted to go to college, and all the coaches came calling. Mike Krzyzewski from Duke, Roy Williams, John Calipari. But he decided he wanted to stay home, close to his mom and her favorite chicken dish. And so he went to Michigan State, a program that hadn't won a national championship in God knows when. And every year they got a little bit closer, but they lost. And in this final year at the school, they went to the championship game against a blonde white guy from Indiana State named Larry Bird. And their team was 33-0. And Magic found the will to win the national championship for Michigan State. And then he told the story of how he was drafted by the Lakers and how he came in as a rookie, and he was always a leader. And he thought when he got there, how am I going to lead? I've got Kareem, I've got Worthy, I've got all these amazing players. How am I ever going to lead these people? I mean, they'll look at me like I'm crazy. And he thought to himself, how do I over-deliver without stepping on any toes? So he got the practice schedule, and it said show up at 10 o'clock every day the first week. But he decided that he was going to show up at 7 a.m. every day and work hard for those 3 hours before the practice. Because in his mind, he'd played against Larry Bird, and he hated playing against Larry Bird. Because Larry Bird was the only player that he knew that worked as hard as he did, had the work ethic that he had. If you know anything about Larry Bird, after every practice, every game, he would go back on the court, and he had a little game he played with himself. The game was, I get to go home when I make 100 free throws in a row. If I clang number 99, I don't get to go home. And Magic knew that about Larry. And so when he got to the pros, he knew he was going to have to be the best he could be. So showing up at 7 a.m. was the only way he knew how to do it. After 3 days, the coaches gathered all the players around, including Kareem, and said, guys, Magic is showing up at 7 a.m. every day. You guys are showing up at 10. Well, that's what it says on the schedule. We're supposed to show up at 10. Yeah, but from now on, we're going to have all of you show up at 7. And they all hated Magic at that point. But he realized that he had to change the culture because the Lakers hadn't won in over a decade. And that year, because of his work ethic and his will and over-delivering, they got to the finals against Moses Malone in Philadelphia. And they were about to fly to the fifth game where they were ahead 3-2 in Philadelphia, which is a brutal place to play. And as Magic tells it, Kareem, they found out, had sprained his ankle, and he couldn't play. He was the greatest player in the world. And they had to play against Moses Malone, one of the greatest centers. All the players were dejected. Fate had shined upon them negatively. They were never going to win without Kareem. But Magic thought to himself, what can I do? What can I do to get these people up and figuring out that they can do it? So he got up early and went to the private jet flying to Philadelphia, and he decided he was getting on first and he would sit in Kareem's seat. And as all the players came on, he said to everybody, hey, I'm in the chair now. I'm in Kareem's seat. You can ride my coattails. We're going to win this championship. And lighting them all up, they were laughing, and Magic stood in for Kareem at center, even though he was 6'9". And that night in Philadelphia, he scored 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, and they won the world championship. He over-delivered. And the message that he said was just so incredible about that, about how he always goes forward and does the extra thing to take things to the next level. And I think to myself a lot of times, and I think about Christine, you don't understand what it takes to put together a show like this, because I started at 0, and their audience is now massive and huge, and people love them because they over-delivered.
Wow, is that a great story or what? Barry Katz is just an amazing man. He's a great talent, and he's just really a wonderful interviewer. He has his own podcast called Industry Standard. And again, if you're a comedian, that's the show to listen to, as well as Storyworthy and My Life in 3 Songs. Because on Industry Standard, Barry talks to really wonderful comedians and they break it down. So thanks again for listening today, you guys. I really appreciate it when you tune in to Storyworthy. Of course, you can always leave Storyworthy a good review over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. And check out StoryworthyPodcast.com, my longest-running website. StoryworthyPodcast.com. You guys can also follow the show on social media at Storyworthy. All right, you guys, one more time on behalf of the very talented Barry Katz. My name is Christine Blackburn saying, make it a Storyworthy week.
Thanks for joining us on the Storyworthy Podcast. We'll be back next week with all new stories. Subscribe to Storyworthy on iTunes and visit the Storyworthy website at StoryworthyPodcast.com.
Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, What are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.